Today, I would like to open the door to new possibilities. My name is Becky Weens, and I'm here to stand up and be a voice for education. So would you think I was crazy if I told you that the whole Alberta education system needs a complete redesign? Well, I'm here to say that it does. And today I would actually like to present the incredible opportunity that I see for education. But before I launch into my main presentation, I'm going to back up just a little bit to clarify why the system needs to be redesigned in the first place. It needs to be redesigned because we want our kids to thrive. They need our wisdom and all the tools and vital keys that we've acquired so that they can experience the joy of living an authentic and empowered life. But this is also a personal cause for me. I don't want to see kids walk in the same shoes that I did, where they have to take the long, hard road through life to get to this place. But unfortunately, I see many of the same vital keys that I was lacking still missing from our education system today. From society's standpoint, I had all the hallmarks for success. I grew up in an upper middle class family. I had a solid work ethic and acquired a lot of practical life skills. I was a strong student academically, went to university, and earned a bachelor's degree in design. But in spite of all of this, I was still missing many of the key foundational pieces that we need in order to thrive. So as an adult, the life I built slowly began to implode, and I found myself having to climb out of a very deep hole. And it would take almost 2 decades focusing intensely on my mental health and personal development for me to get out. It has not been an easy journey. And while I'm proud to say I'm finally moving forward and beginning to actually experience this joy that comes from living authentically, I don't want our kids to wake up in the same deep, dark place because they've only been living to please everyone else and have never discovered who they really are. I don't want them to spend half their life striving to reach some definition of success to only go through the pain of watching everything they've ever built come crashing down because they're emotionally bankrupt and the life they've been trying to hold together is no longer sustainable. But this isn't about just championing a new cause to add more to our curriculum. Design is my passion and my life. And after spending over half a decade working on the front lines in education, I can see that many of the problems stem from the design of the system itself. Alberta students deserve a world-class education system. And in this day and age, with all of the technology, resources, expertise, and wisdom that we have to draw from, there's no reason we can't give it to them. But life is short. What do you want the future to look like? We need to pause and really think about this because it's easy to get distracted and caught up in all the commotion that's going on around us and lose sight of what really matters. So what kind of legacy do you want to leave? I know I want to build a better future for our kids and for our future grandkids and great-grandkids. So I am here as a voice calling for change. And if, like me, you are frustrated with the direction that education is going and feel like it's time to begin a new path, then this is also your chance for your voice to be heard. I have started a petition on change.org called A Complete Redesign of the Alberta Education System. So now, for the reason you're here, allow me to introduce what a complete redesign of the Alberta education system could look like. Just give me a moment to share my screen. A complete redesign of the Alberta education system. Before we can forge ahead, we need to pause for a moment and take a look at our past. Then try to understand where we are so that we can determine where we need to go. In the beginning, before there was any technology or even indoor plumbing, the formula for education was very simple. It was the 3 R's: reading, writing, and arithmetic. But when we fast forward to today, you can see the formula has become much more colorful and complex. Technology continues to grow at an exponential rate. We are beginning to recognize the importance of social and emotional learning. And then there are budgets and inflation, which continue to put a huge squeeze on funding. But our system is also now being undermined by several factors. Students are encountering some adverse effects from technology. There's the issue of class sizes and the exponential growth in behavior supports. And not to mention, there's been a big shift in the family structure too. So this infographic is just a very simplistic view, but hopefully gives you a little bit more context about the complexity that our education system must deal with today. There are lots of factors and variables that have been added to the equation over the last 100 years, but yet how education is delivered has remained the same. But when we look at other industries, it's very evident they have not only refined their systems and processes, but have completely redesigned them. Airplanes have now far surpassed their initial designs. When they were first invented, they could barely reach an altitude of 3,000 feet and flew only 40 miles per hour. And yet today's airplanes fly 27 times higher and reach speeds over 2,000 miles per hour. It's very easy to see that engineers have capitalized on the advances in technology. They've explored the use of new materials and continue to adapt to the varying conditions and new requirements that have evolved over time. And with each new design, they analyze feedback and resolve all the conflicts and issues so that airplanes can be operating at their peak performance. But when we perform a system check on education, there are many warning signs and alarms going off that are alerting us to the fact that there are some serious problems in public education. But unfortunately, it's the curriculum that gets all of the attention. And while I agree that there are some issues with the curriculum, okay, maybe more than a few, I believe we need to step back and expand our perspective because many of the issues stem from the design of the system itself. All of the factors and variables that have been added have now stretched the system to where it's reaching a breaking point. And we can't just keep adding to it without making fundamental changes to the design of the system itself. So what would it look like if we could hit the reset button and start fresh? I believe it's time to look through a new lens, set aside how we've always done things, and design a whole new system of excellence that's tailor-made and responsive to the needs of today. So what could this new education system look like? Well, we can't just jump in and start making changes. For any system to function, we have to start with the end in mind and formulate a clear picture of what we are actually trying to achieve, and then design a system detailing all the pieces and components that are needed to achieve our goal. In other words, we need to know the outcome. So what exactly is the outcome or goal of education? Here is what I see. Every student is like a building under construction. And while we don't exactly know what the finished project will look like, Alberta education should create a solid foundation so that students can reach new heights, where they can thrive and live an authentic and empowered life. When I was thinking of students in terms of this building analogy, I wanted to find a picture that would best represent this vision, and I found the perfect image. The Burj Al Arab in Dubai. It's one of the most incredible buildings on the face of the planet. It's a structure that is designed to amaze, a powerful and precise representation and a perfect metaphor of the outcome Alberta education should strive to achieve. We need an education system that inspires students to become the architects of their own life, where they will have the vision and creativity, as well as the foundation and capacity to build a life that is amazing and beyond our imagination. If Alberta graduates had access to a world-class system like this, they would become the unique, innovative, one-of-a-kind, cutting-edge leaders of tomorrow, people who would challenge the status quo, push the limits, and dazzle the world with their vision and creativity. But a world-class education system is not about pushing students to achieve some grand new design or about having them strive to reach the top in their field, because not everyone's created for that. It's about building a rock-solid base that they can launch from. It's about equipping and training them so that they can succeed in all areas of life, helping them cultivate and explore their talents, growing their confidence and curiosity, awakening their dreams and passions, supporting them as they find their fit and place to contribute. This is all about encouraging them to become the architects of their own life so that they can boldly step out, take their place, and add their own unique color and flavor to the world around them. So if this is a picture of what we desire to achieve, then we needed to design an education system that will make this possible. A system that teaches students critical life skills, a system that inspires and launches students on a personal journey of self-discovery, and lastly, a system that can easily evolve with the times so that we can keep students on the leading edge of innovation and change. But for any project to be successful, first you have to start with an accurate blueprint. This means we need a Made in Alberta master blueprint for education to help construct a new path forward. Education is all about establishing the foundation. And in the construction world, the strength of a foundation directly dictates the size of structure that can be built upon it. It's the most critical part of any building. If we want students to reach their capacity and tap into their full potential, they need a strong, solid foundation they can begin to build their life upon. Because without it, they will risk imploding and having to start from scratch later on in life. And unfortunately, this happens all too frequently. But our education system is uniquely positioned to help minimize this and actually plays a significant role in establishing the foundation in all of society. So what makes a strong foundation? Here's what I've learned. If we want students to thrive, then we must focus on the whole development of a child. So embedded into every student's foundation, there needs to be a solid understanding of their identity and belonging. They need to comprehend their self-worth and understand their personal power so that they are confident to sit in the driver's seat and take charge of their own life. They need to be taught about character, actively learning how their values, habits, attitudes, and choices can either lead them down a difficult path or how these can open doors of opportunity. They also need to acquire social and emotional intelligence so they can learn to be in control of themselves, setting boundaries, navigating relationships, and having the ability to work through conflict in healthy ways. They also need to develop executive functions and other basic life skills. These are things that will allow them to function effectively within their environment, so they can make a positive contribution to our world. And lastly, there is still the need for strong academics, where students learn to think critically, articulate their thoughts and ideas clearly, and where they can analyze and solve problems. All of these pillars form the foundation upon which a person can build and experience the real fulfillment of living an authentic and empowered life. And when I look back on my own life, I only had half of these. I had decent character along with some life skills and academic intelligence. But I was missing all of the other vital keys, so it's no wonder my life crumbled. But can you imagine what it would be like to have a solid understanding in all of these areas by the time you're 18? Instead of taking the long, hard road and having to go through a midlife awakening, we could trigger that same seismic shift while kids are still young. But I'm serious, this would impact generations. I want our ceiling to be the floor that they launch from. After we identify the critical pieces that need to be established or integrated into a foundation, then comes the challenge of designing and building a framework for the system so we actually achieve our goal. At the moment, Alberta Education gives every one of the 40,000 plus teachers a detailed checklist of the outcomes they're expected to complete, but then doesn't give them a blueprint or instructions or the tools and materials needed to complete the job. But somehow expects this process to be successful and efficient. But let's think of this another way. How well would the Burj Al Arab have turned out if crews were just given a picture and no detailed blueprint? How solid and precise would the structure have been if they didn't have professional engineers designing the foundation and the framework? And then if the builder had to source their own materials and still complete construction in the same time frame, do you think the quality would suffer? With our current education system, every teacher is literally reinventing the wheel, functioning as the architect, engineer, designer, project manager, and builder, all on their own. This system used to work in the past when the formula for education was simple. But given the complexity of our current system, this process is now inefficient and no longer sustainable. So I can see the need to design a framework for education, where we create a bit of a system blueprint that would act as a guide to ensure we're moving and growing in the right direction, where we maintain a clear focus of our targeted outcomes so we aren't overloading or underperforming in any areas, where we capitalize on the incredible talent and expertise within the industry so we can establish a baseline of excellence across the entire system, where we improve efficiency by utilizing the amazing technology that exists. And if we construct an efficient order of operations, it will decrease all the inefficiencies and make room for more growth. The whole point of creating a framework is so that we can optimize our capacity and improve the quality of our output. To give you an example of the benefits that can be gained by creating a framework, think IKEA. They have a system in place so that they get their desired outcome every single time. And they're successful at what they do because they have detailed all the pieces they need and then designed and streamlined the process so that their whole system is working together. Now, don't get me wrong, we don't want students to all look the same. But there needs to be the ability to establish a foundation in a way that works every time. At the end of the day, it's about making it possible for students to climb and reach new heights. But in order to climb efficiently, it's time to take a look at what's in our students' backpack. The new curriculum that's currently being rolled out is ambitious but highly unrealistic. If you overlay all the outcomes of every subject, it's the equivalent of asking students to climb with a very heavy, overloaded backpack. Now, there's nothing wrong with setting high expectations and outcomes, but a heavy load makes it hard to climb. It's like preparing for a backpack trip. There's a pile of content that's sitting in the middle of the floor that Alberta Education wants students to learn, but now we actually have to get it in their backpack. With the new curriculum, it won't all fit. There simply aren't enough hours in a day to effectively teach all the outcomes. So when designing the system blueprint, it would be important to reevaluate every outcome, every nut and bolt, so to speak, and ask ourselves if it adds value, if it's relevant, and if it has meaning, where we focus on quality over quantity. Now, perhaps you're wondering just how and where do we start? When sorting through and determining the highest quality outcomes, I believe it would be important to expand our view and look beyond the new curriculum. Because there has been some strong feedback to suggest that there are still some gaps and concerns with parts of this curriculum. But we also don't need to start from scratch. What if we also reopened and included the 2018 draft curriculum that was never launched? I think it's unfortunate that years of work from educators and professionals was shelved without giving it a second glance. So if we included the 2018 draft, we could recover all of the valuable contributions that never had a chance to be utilized. And the remaining piece would integrate outcomes that align with all the foundational pillars. So here's the sweet spot. By extracting all the gold nuggets from these three sources, the Alberta curriculum would encompass some of the most esteemed outcomes found nowhere else in Canada, or maybe even the world. And to build any refined system, the sequence and order of operations is very important. So this means analyzing and examining outcomes to ensure that they're age appropriate and that we set realistic expectations that students can actually achieve. When looking at the overall system, we may need to shift when content is taught for learning to be more effective. The current curriculum tends to force too much too soon. And when too much content is pushed through, and if students aren't developmentally ready, it results in a poor retention of information and makes for a very weak understanding. Plus, it's also a very ineffective use of time. Sometimes what takes hours and hours of practice could be taught in much less time once students have reached a higher level of maturity. By determining where and when the pieces fit best, the process would be streamlined and efficient. So throughout the system, if we use the right tool for the right job at the right time, we will achieve the right results. And while we're mapping out the sequence and order, wouldn't it make sense to create a framework with easy to manage steps for students to climb? At the moment, there are gaps that are greater than some students can manage. So if lots of little steps were built into the system, it would decrease the number of students who are falling through the cracks while allowing more students to succeed and reach the top. To put a system like this together, I can see the need for a more extensive online database for teachers. I believe this would be a key component to establishing curriculum excellence. Teachers could stop reinventing the wheel, and instead, by working together, they could go on to perfect it. With a digital database, scaffolded lessons would be built directly into the system and ready to go. Now, I realize that pre-planned lessons may not work in every subject or situation, so this is about adapting and designing resources that are responsive to different needs, and where teachers are offered a variety of lessons to choose from. But I also believe it's still imperative for the system to stay flexible enough to allow teachers the freedom to explore and use their own creativity too. So this isn't a one-size-fits-all approach. But with an online database, large chunks of the curriculum could be digitized to create that solid basic framework for education. And having a digital database full of resources would help alleviate prep time for teachers. This is something that's in a critical short supply. And I can see it being particularly helpful for new teachers or educators who have to cover a leave of absence or teach split grades. And in our fast-paced world, there's an insatiable thirst for efficiency, so lessons in a digital format would be easy to update and refine, meaning that content could continually grow and evolve. So in other words, it's time to work smarter. Now that we have looked at the foundation and the framework, the next section of the master blueprint is the actual content or materials we are building with. And I think everyone will agree, we want the gold standard. But teachers are expected to mine the gold themselves. And they spend tons of hours of unpaid time scouring the internet and digging through the mountains of resources that are available to try and find these nuggets of gold. And they often use a website called Teachers Pay Teachers. These are resources other teachers have created and sell online. But instead of teachers paying teachers, perhaps it's time our government starts paying teachers to design effective materials that are custom-made for our curriculum. I realize that supplying lessons and materials is a different approach than what we've always done. But we need to remember that the jet engine was a shift in a completely new direction compared to the turboprop airplane. Jet engines revolutionized the aviation world. Airplanes could be made much larger. They had fewer moving parts, so they became safer and more reliable. Plus, they were less costly to operate, which opened the doors for a lot more people to fly. The jet engine also offered much greater speeds and long-range capabilities. This increased efficiency, and it also became possible to reach new destinations all over the world. In education, I can see that we are at a critical junction. And if we want to become efficient, while at the same time increasing the capacity and distance that students can go, then it's time to design a new engine that powers our education system. So when creating the content or designing the new engine, professional collaboration would be key. There is an incredible pool of talent among Alberta educators, so wouldn't it make sense to capitalize on all their strengths? Every student deserves the same high-quality education. But the reality is, individual teachers don't necessarily have the breadth of knowledge and expertise in every single subject area. And there simply isn't time for them to do everything well, especially since the outcomes and expectations are continually increasing. I also see the need for professional collaboration because not every teacher has a master's in psychology. And yet Alberta education somehow thinks that teachers should easily be able to provide high-quality lessons that address and build mental health. In the curriculum, there are lots of ideologies, impressive words, and wonderful sounding outcomes with regards to mental health and wellness. But then there isn't a plan or detailed instructions given to teachers on how to accomplish these goals. To see the biggest impact of dollars spent on mental health, what if we capitalized on the tremendous opportunity that's available in education and mentor and guide all of our students towards stronger mental health right from young? And when it comes to professional collaboration, we have a duty to invest in the calls to action that are outlined in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, which means we need to collaborate with elders and Indigenous leaders so that their stories and teachings are woven directly into the curriculum in a way that's meaningful, honors their history, and celebrates our cultural diversity. These kinds of outcomes can't just be typed into a curriculum. There needs to be thought, intention, and purpose in the way these materials are presented so that it's relevant and impactful for students at every grade. And then what if we wanted to build a turbocharged engine? Well, that could be accomplished with multi-layered learning. Now, I realize that cross-curricular lessons are nothing new, but to be done well, these kind of lessons take a lot of time to plan and create. But it also needs to be taken a step further so that all the core foundational pillars are embedded throughout the entire curriculum. Multi-layered learning is about making connections with our external or physical world so that students increase their awareness and understanding of how to cultivate and grow their internal world. And while we're teaching students about computers, why wouldn't we also teach them about how their brain or internal computer works? Self-awareness is a fascinating adventure, and it would set our kids up for success if they better understood how their thoughts and emotions worked, or how to reprogram their brain's operating system when it's triggered by trauma, negative mindsets, fear, and all of that kind of stuff. I see so much untapped potential with multi-layered learning, but again, it would take professional collaboration to unlock the power of this unexplored domain. And then in a world-class education system, learning needs to be a rich and engaging experience for today's students. This means lessons need to be infused with technology. Even though technology creates many, many problems, it inspires curiosity and allows students to explore new frontiers. But there are loads of missed opportunities in this area because teachers simply don't have time to search, sort through, and learn all the different programs and platforms and systems that are out there. So by crafting lesson modules and resources with clearly detailed instructions for teachers, current technology could be better utilized to make learning even more captivating and fun. And lastly, content needs to be designed for students. Now, I know this sounds rather obvious, but you would be amazed at how poorly some of the materials are designed. Very often, there is not enough space for students to work and write. Or pages are overcrowded and overwhelming, which can trigger anxiety and cause kids to shut down or give up. And then the font is often too small, or instructions are too difficult to read. Or there's a complete lack of instructions or examples, which prevents students from being independent thinkers and working ahead. Or they are working ahead, but then are practicing things incorrectly. And finally, some of the resources are just simply outdated because they were created in a completely different era and leave students confused because they have no context for what they're actually looking at. But teachers barely have time to find materials and resources, let alone redesign them. So there's lots of improvement that's needed in the functional design of the lessons themselves. So while the curriculum and all the outcomes are important, the content is actually the powerhouse that runs the system. And by creating content that merges all four of these attributes together, education would be powered by a supercharged engine. Now it's time to look at how we monitor the performance of the system. I won't spend a lot of time on this segment because I feel it's pretty evident that if feedback is encouraged and embraced, you'll naturally see growth and improvement, as well as an increase in morale within the industry. But if I think of feedback in terms of the big picture, I can see the need for two main feedback loops. One would be to monitor the performance of the internal structure or more the mechanical side of the system. There needs to be regular feedback that identifies any problems, conflicts, weaknesses, so that necessary changes can be implemented so the system can continue to be optimized. So this is about tending to all those check engine lights and diagnostic trouble codes. And then the second tier of feedback would monitor the output, or in this case, it measures student growth. And one problem that seems to be particularly prevalent in large organizations is where there's a lack of communication between the various branches, where each department operates independently. So I can see the value of these two feedback loops being connected, because sometimes the problem is not with the students, but with the assessments or lesson materials themselves. So teachers need to have the ability to submit feedback so technical improvements and changes can be reviewed and implemented in a timely fashion. But ultimately, the goal is to create a dynamic feedback system that allows for a continual flow and connection between both sides. What I can also see going forward is less focus on static grade level testing and instead moving towards building assessments directly into the lessons. When designing education materials, there's an opportunity to create a built-in rubric or assessment right into the lessons. This is an example of some work that was created for a student several years ago. And when given one of the difficult questions on the right, the student shut down and did not even attempt the work. But when presented in this format, the student not only attempted the first question, but grew in confidence with every step and completed the entire page without support. I can see a huge benefit to creating worksheets and resources with a graduated degree of difficulty built into them. This format would naturally accommodate diverse learners. It would build student confidence, increase independence. Plus, it would provide yet another diagnostic tool for teachers. And parents want clear and meaningful communication. And I have to say that I think reporting has definitely started to evolve in this area. It's moved from a very static reactionary approach of just simple letter grades in each course to a more proactive approach that's aimed to offer more engagement and information for parents. These are shifts that are going in the right direction. But I'm wondering if it would be beneficial to create a comprehensive provincial learner profile. Every school division creates their own, but what if they combined all of their strengths and developed a universal format that could be implemented province-wide? This would be another case of maybe working smarter and not harder. It would make sense if a comprehensive learner profile also provided feedback about a student's whole development. And the reason I say this is because it's now widely known that emotional intelligence is actually a greater factor in determining a person's success than even academic intelligence. So then isn't this information kind of important? It's critical for parents and guardians to get a complete picture of where their child is at. And if a learner profile included all the foundational pieces, such as emotional literacy, character, executive functions, and all the other foundational skills, they could see where their child is struggling. And then this information would allow us to really work together to target and reinforce those areas. But giving more detailed and meaningful feedback is only half of the equation. Our education system has a responsibility to provide parents and guardians with resources so that they can adequately deal with the feedback they are given. But this piece is missing. So I would like to advocate for the creation of a parent and guardian handbook, which would have up-to-date resources along with pivotal information on how to best support a child. How I see this working is a digital handbook would offer grade-specific supports with practical and detailed ways to strengthen skills. There would be key advice and exercises for targeted intervention, not only in academics, but also for social and emotional literacy, executive functions, and even include other areas such as speech therapy and occupational therapy. As parents, we don't have time to become experts in all of these fields, nor do we necessarily have the money to pay for outside interventions. So if Alberta Education created a digital handbook, it would pave the way for parents and guardians to become true partners in education. We have now looked at some of the main internal components of the education system, but it's important to be aware that there are other factors and policies that are undermining education. Class sizes would be one of the hotter topics I can think of. And if we want to improve the quality that students receive, it will require examining the system from all sides so that we can identify and resolve more of the issues. I'm not going to dive into all the details, but there is one controversial matter I would like to highlight. And that is, I believe it's time to let students fail. Now, I know this idea may be too radical for most, but here's how I see it. In swimming lessons, you don't advance to the next level unless you pass. Because if you don't learn how to swim without a life jacket, you'll drown when you jump into the deep end. This makes perfect sense in swimming, but for some reason, we ignore the same type of thinking in education. Students are not really allowed to fail until grade 10. But to live an empowered life, don't we want our students to learn how to be accountable and take responsibility for their choices, even from a young age? Don't they need to learn from their mistakes, not avoid them or be protected from the consequences of them? Maybe it's time we change our approach and view it from a different perspective. Lots of people believe failure is the end, but this is simply not true. Failure is not the end. In fact, people who have achieved remarkable success believe something quite different. Successful people know that mistakes and failures are actually found on the path to success. So instead of sheltering our kids from it, let's reframe our language and take away the negative connotation that we've believed, and instead start teaching our kids how to navigate through it. Because at the end of the day, failures are simply undesired outcomes. And undesired outcomes are not a bad thing. They actually build resiliency and teach us how to solve problems. And they offer fantastic lessons to help us understand our personal power and also promote personal responsibility. Undesired outcomes enable us to become more flexible and adaptable, and also motivate a person to take action or shift gears. These are all positive outcomes. If students are to succeed in life, then don't we need an education system that focuses on preparing students for the realities they will encounter in life? I'll leave this idea for you to ponder some more, but I hope it begins to kickstart some new conversations. So this now wraps up my presentation, and I'm well aware that what I'm seeing is only part of a complete picture. There are many other aspects and pieces that need to be considered, and I'm sure there will be even better solutions than what I'm seeing. But as we bring all of our pieces together, I believe we will begin to see a bigger and more amazing picture for education than we have ever seen before. So where do we go from here? The Burj Al Arab was almost an inconceivable idea at the time, and yet 30 years later, it is still inspiring possibilities. To redesign an education system would be an equally monumental undertaking. But we each hold a key that needs to be joined together if we want to unlock the fullness of life and leave a legacy that is greater than ourselves. On our own, we cannot accomplish much, but together the possibilities are endless. I believe Alberta education has a very bright future. Our government will need to hear from Albertans before there is any possibility of changing our future. But I'm not simply asking our government to redesign education. There are 3 specific parts or conditions included in my petition. So the first condition is I am calling on our government to launch a complete redesign of the Alberta education system. Because it's not just the curriculum that needs changing, but the entire system needs to be looked at from all sides, so that all of the problems, issues, conflicts, and weaknesses can be identified, and then from there they can begin to be resolved. The second condition is the redesign would need to be spearheaded by a nonpartisan team of people who are actively involved in all aspects of education. So this means no bureaucrats, university professors, or experts from outside our country. For a redesign to be successful, the team needs to be comprised of strong leaders who have served on the front lines in education. The real boots on the ground. These are the people who will have the wisdom and expertise to identify the problems, and who will also be the best people to offer the best solutions as well. So at a minimum, the team would need to include educators from every grade, learning coaches, administrators, elders and Indigenous leaders, psychologists, a speech and language pathologist, and other key people in education. And the third condition states the redesign would need to be done in conjunction with Albertans. Our government champions made in Alberta solutions. So then it stands to reason that Albertans, and especially educators from across the province, are included and have input into the redesign. Not just where we can give feedback at the end, but where our feedback would be used to help chart the new path forward. I will admit the thought of asking our government to redesign the whole system is a little daunting and makes me a little nervous. But with the right team of people leading the way, and by engaging a process that is transparent and open, I believe building a world-class education system is possible.